Greetings and salutations, one and all. This is Captain Lunar, and I'm here to bring you a show unlike any other. We'll be starting a new segment this show called Pulp Days. Now, Pulp Days will be a look into a certain area of fiction that, honestly, I love, and that would be pulp characters. Yes, pulp characters. Before we had comic books and superheroes, there were pulp magazines and pulp heroes. Now, what makes a pulp hero a pulp hero? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out as we delve into our first entry with The Phantom Detective. The Phantom Detective was published by Ned Pine's Thrilling, or Better or Standard Publishing, as they were also known. Ned Pine's had a comic book imprint, which collectors usually refer to as Nedder Comics, and The Phantom Detective had a series in their title, Thrilling Comics, from issues 53 to 70 from 1946 to 1949. However, we're not here to talk about the comic books, we're here to talk about the character as he first appeared in the pulps. The Phantom Detective was the second pulp hero magazine published after The Shadow. The first issue was released in February 1933, a month before Doc Savage, which was released in March 1933. The title continued to be released until 1953 with a total of 170 issues. This is the third highest number of issues for a character pulp after The Shadow, which had 325 issues, and Doc Savage, which had 181. In Western titles, Texas Rangers would have around 212 issues of their main character, known as the Lone Wolf, which we will be covering later. The stories were credited to several pseudonyms. The first 11 Phantom Detective stories were published under the Better House pseudonym of G. Wayman Jones, and were largely written by D.L. Champion, a.k.a. Jack Darcy. The rest were published under the pseudonym Robert Wallace. These were largely written by Edwin V. Burkholder. The character of the Phantom Detective, or just the Phantom as he was called in the stories, is actually the wealthy Richard Curtis Van Loan. In the first few issues of the title, the Phantom is introduced as a world-famous detective whose true identity is only known by one man, Frank Havens, the publisher of the Clarion newspaper. Richard Curtis Van Loan is orphaned at an early age, but inherits wealth, as most pulp characters are actually quite well off. Before World War I, he leads a life of an idle rich boy. But during the war, he becomes a pilot and downs so many planes he becomes known as a flying ace. However, after the war, Van Loan had a difficult time returning to his old life. At the suggestion of his father's friend, Havens, he sets out to solve a crime that had stumped the police. After solving it, he decides he's found his calling. So, he begins to train himself in all facets of forensics, becomes a master of disguise and escape. He makes a name for himself as the Phantom, who all police agencies around the world know and respect. When dealing with law enforcement officials, he carries a platinum badge in the shape of a domino mask as proof of his identity. Because apparently you can't just have a double of that, and anyone could take his identity. Come to think of it, I don't think that was actually ever a story in this. Weird. However, despite the name and title of the stories, the initial stories were less about a detective than an adventurer using disguises and lucky escapes to conclude his cases. In one issue, Havens installs a red beacon on the roof of the Clarion building, which he turns on when he needs to see the Phantom. Any Batman fan will recognize this as a forerunner to the Bat Signal. In fact, that element was actually used in Batman as an inspiration. Other people in Van Loan's life include Muriel Havens, Frank Havens' daughter, who is his on-again, off-again girlfriend, and Clarion reporter Steve Houston. Lawrence Donovan introduced a kid sidekick named Chip Dorlin in the 1939 novel The Sampen Murders. After Pearl Harbor, however, Chip Dorlin joined the Army as intelligence officer, briefly returned to the series after the war. Van Loan's former mechanic and pilot, Jerry Lanigan, assists him in several cases, as do other characters from time to time. The Phantom also employs several alternate identities, including Lester Cornwell and Dr. Paul Bendix, a chemist. The pseudonym for one of the authors, Robert Wallace, was coined to evoke popular British thriller novelist Edgar Wallace, and was also used on short stories and novelettes not featuring the Phantom. Interestingly enough, this is not the only Phantom to be a pulp hero, as many may know of Lee Falk's The Phantom, that purple-clad jungle adventurer who starred in a so-so movie as played by Billy Zane. However, because of The Phantom Detective, Lee Falk actually abandoned his original setup for the Phantom. In fact, the original setup for the Phantom was he was a wealthy playboy by the name of Jimmy Wells and fought crime in Manhattan, before almost immediately becoming a jungle adventurer named by the name of Kit Walker. Apparently, this was due to Lee Falk fearing too many similarities to the Phantom Detective, but that's neither been proven or seriously alleged. However, it would make sense. So, where is the Phantom Detective now? Well, the character has endured in several reprints, and while there has never quite been a serious attempt to revive the character due to being in the public domain, the character is in the public domain. And while there has never actually been a film adaptation, there was a scene in the film The Artist where the character George Valentine adopts an appearance similar to the Phantom, minus the cape, for a scene involving a film set in the movie called A Russian Affair, which showcased at the film's start. So, if you'd like to know more, please dig up more on the Phantom Detective at your own leisure. It's a wonderful character, and was also one of the major inspirations behind Batman, though a lesser spoken of one. So, this has been Captain Vern Lunar, and I wish you all a merry day and a eventful holidays. This has been Pulp Days, and we hope to see you back real soon.